Hello and welcome to the Storyboard Show. My name's Ian Thompson.
And I'm John Gilbert.
And this is, as we say, the Storyboard Show, the show where we like to hear stories from people and then also look at how these stories can help us in business.
Absolutely.
Today with me is...
It's me again, sorry.
John Gilbert.
No special guest, but you know,
and
I do my best.
Yeah, exactly. We've been running a couple of projects recently, haven't we? So we decided to come on camera and talk to everyone about trust, really, and about why it is when you're putting out media, when you're creating media, why it is that people seem to trust more people like us.
Yes, and by us we don't mean
it's not specifically
Ian and
us.
John particularly. No, I think as an audience, it's looking at the person that's projecting a message and finding something in them that's relatable for you. And then it's basically wondering why we're much more likely to listen and then change our attitude, change our behaviour than we will from somebody that's very different from us.
Someone who you can relate to, not necessarily a couple of guys on camera who are maybe reasonably untrustworthy.
Yeah, but if you can relate to that as a viewer, then you're more likely to listen to us. Okay.
Yeah, boom.
So the example that we came across recently is we've been running a project across 4 different schools in the area, and called Success Stories, which we've been doing for an organisation called Force NCOP. And the whole idea of that programme is about raising aspirations amongst young people. And it was just really clear to us that as part of the programme, you and I have been sharing our experiences, our advice on so on, which they maybe listen to a little bit. But part of it is we bring a role model in and somebody that they get an opportunity to interview them about their story, about their motivations, about just their journey, I suppose. And it's just been so clear to us that if that, for example, that person grew up where you grew up, they're just they're just hanging on every single word they said.
Well, it's interesting that you say that it's not necessarily us as well. I think what's been quite interesting is we did it in 2 schools first, didn't we, where the young people specifically chose, I want to go and do this course, because they knew it was going to be about maybe a bit of media, maybe a bit of film. They knew it was going to be about some, social media stuff and marketing. And what was quite interesting there was, they were really interested in what we had to say because they were specifically interested in media and, they could relate to that and they were... they sort of, saw you as someone who had your own marketing company and, had been working in that for a long time. They maybe enjoyed doing the filming, the editing with me and whatnot. And then we also did it in 2 schools where some of the young people had chosen to do it, some of them hadn't. Mm-hmm. And there you saw something very different because it really depended on the guests that we brought in. I mean, they still, they were great, they enjoyed the course, but they really wanted to listen to the guests when they could relate to them. I think there was one specific example in the most recent school, wasn't there? Do you want to tell us about
of course.
that?
So the speaker that we had was an entrepreneur called Danny Comerford, and he's done some media coverage recently. He started his own basically tailored suits he sells through his website, and he's from a particular area in Hull where aspirations are not as high as maybe they should be. And he's felt that it's been told by teachers and people in his life that he was never going to achieve anything. And he told his story, and then we had just a lad sitting there who did the interview with me, who was from that estate, and it was just like, you could just almost see like the just firing off like kind of electrons in his brain and stuff like. He was inspired. Now, with respect to what Danny said, which was great, I could have said that, you could have said that, somebody else could have said that, and it just would not have had the same impact. It wasn't particular magic in his words.
It wasn't that he was really into fashion. It wasn't that he was really into even being an entrepreneur or owning his own business. It was the fact that this guy had an inspirational story and he came from the same background.
And that was it. It was just he's from the same background as me, being told that you're not good enough. And then he took a I'll show you attitude, which is something I could talk about for hours, but I won't do now as well. But I love that. It's that kind of turning that negativity to positivity into fuel to like, I'm going to go and do something. And you just saw that. It was one of those real clear moments where somebody has been inspired.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, you're absolutely right with Danny. It was everything that had happened in his more recent life, he attributed it to his previous life. Not that they're separate, but he attributed it to because of this that happened to me.
Reincarnated.
Because of this that happened earlier in my life, then this is why I did this. And it was, and I suppose that's what makes it inspirational.
Yeah, it is. And similarly, so last week I was at the business day at the Spa Bridlington, and I was hosting one of the discussions there by FEO, for Entrepreneurs Only. And we talked there about just the different programs that people run. But one of the themes throughout that was if you are a business owner, you can go and read a business book or study a business degree or go listen to a lecture. It just kind of doesn't quite sink in. But when you relate to a speech given or a conversation that you have with an entrepreneur or another business owner, you just hang on every word, and you just learn in a way that it's just so much more relatable, so much more credible in a sense. So we had an environment there, a room full of people who are like-minded, and I mean, doesn't mean you have to agree with everything everybody says, but you're damn sure you pay attention to it. To the point for me that I'm a constant student of any kind of discipline as well, but what I get from For Entrepreneurs Only, I describe it as a kick up the arse, because if I go and hear somebody else's story and I hear about all of these things they're doing, you kind of sit there a bit uncomfortable going, they're doing stuff that I know I should be doing, but I'm not. But they're the people I would listen to. They don't like single me out and going, you don't do that very well, do you, John? But I feel like they are at the time. So they're having that real kind of influence on my attitude and then my behaviour in a way that probably nobody else could do, because I associate with the different qualities that person has.
And is it the person, or is it the experience that they've had? So is it, for example, like whenever I'm learning something new, especially if it's quite a theoretical thing, I always like to sort of try and find or ask someone if they're teaching me it, give me a real life example. Talk me through an example of this that I might come across. And is it that sort of thing where, say the For Entrepreneurs Only do, then they're talking about something, you're sort of, I had that exact same problem 2 months ago, sir. And this is great to hear what you did about it, because I did, A, B, C, and it kind of worked all right, but you did X, Y, Z, and it sounds like it's gone a lot better for you. Is it those familiar experiences, or is it with Danny and the young lad at the school, was that, similar experiences in maybe home life or in, what it used to be like at school, or, playing out or whatever?
Well, I mean, it's either and both is the answer to that as well. And I think that certainly what I've observed and experienced myself is that the influence, when we talk about why do we listen to people like us, I don't mean like if somebody's watching this and they are a white man in his early 40s, late 30s, that they're going to do.
There's no need to gesture.
I know there wasn't, was there? But there was, I'm going to do it while I still can. And then it'll be mid 40s, early 40s. But in that meantime, but it's not that. So it's not like, when I say people like us, it's not necessarily people that look like us, sound like us. There's an element to that, and I think that's what we saw there before. It's much more about those experiences, particularly the negative experiences that you have in there as well.
I suppose it's overcoming that adversity, isn't it?
And that's it. Yeah. And some of my role models are women, for example, in that sense. It's not the and that's just came through success stories as well, because we did say, who do you want to interview and so on like that, and gender just wasn't an issue at all. It was much more the journey and experience that somebody had been on. So when I talk about people like us, it's, I guess, those shared experiences and outlook on life rather than a demographic.
So, as we always ask at the end of the Storyboard Show, what can this teach us about business?
What can this teach? I think really it hacks back round to one of the things that we constantly talk about, is that if you're trying to get a message across, either whether it's a behavioural change project that Eskimo Soup would do, or something that's more commercial that maybe we would do with Storyboard, I think what you're looking to do is, if you've got a message to do, it needs to be the customer or the people like you front and foremost of that message wherever possible, because that's the person like you. So it's just like, you wouldn't have website copy necessarily where it's like, oh, this talks about how amazing we are. That's why we have testimonials and things like that, because they'll say, I had this problem and they solved it for me and I felt reassured and I'm really glad I did it. That is a much more powerful message, and particularly if you can do it on video and sound, it's just going to feel much more authentic.
Yeah, and I suppose, like we talked about in a previous Storyboard as well, where we were saying about whenever someone comes in to be interviewed, then we always like to chat to them first, get to know them a bit. And I suppose that's what it's all about, is get to know your audience. Do like Eskimo Soup do. I know for pretty much all the campaigns things, they'll do focus groups. They'll get to know who that audience is, so that they know the best way to try and engage with them and to relate to them.
Yeah, and do you know what? Well, whenever I'm given this opportunity, I'm just going to remind people, some people don't do that, right? I don't get it. It's the, we've actually got a live audience here of marketing students. We were discussing this before.
Should have got them to clap like on Big Breakfast.
Yes, prove that you're here, guys. See, they're having a great time. But I was just saying that marketing theory will tell you that you need to understand the audience before you develop anything. But some people just jump straight into the clever idea and go, yeah, the audience will love it, without actually asking those questions. It doesn't work.
Speak to your audience. Know who they are, and you'll be able to relate to them better. Well, John, thanks ever so much for that.
Thank you.
You've been watching the Storyboard Show. See you again next week.
Cheers, guys.